Rain slammed against the glass walls of Hartwell Technologies while Olivia Hartwell sat alone in the dark executive office staring at the final bankruptcy notice trembling slightly in her hands. Below her, downtown Boston glowed cold and indifferent beneath midnight traffic, but inside the 32nd floor office, silence felt heavier than failure itself. Half the desks downstairs already sat empty after months of layoffs. Coffee cups remained abandoned beside computers that would never turn on again. The company her father built over 30 years was dying quietly around her, and for the first time in her life, Olivia looked completely human instead of powerful. Have you ever reached a moment where giving up felt easier than breathing through one more disappointment? Olivia closed her eyes slowly. 3 months earlier, she fired Daniel Reed. Single father. Senior systems analyst. Quiet man with permanent exhaustion in his eyes and a wedding ring he still wore 2 years after losing his wife. He arrived late too often because his 6-year-old son Mason struggled with severe anxiety after his mother's death. But investors demanded efficiency. And Olivia had become dangerously good at sacrificing people to protect numbers. I'm sorry, she told Daniel during the termination meeting, though her voice barely sounded sincere anymore. The company needs stronger performance right now. Daniel stared at the floor for several seconds before nodding quietly. Then he asked something that haunted her for months afterward. When did struggling become the same thing as failing? She never answered. Now Hartwell Technologies itself stood hours away from collapse. Banks refused extensions. Investors disappeared. Employees cried quietly in elevators thinking nobody noticed. Olivia leaned forward shakily at her desk and signed the bankruptcy documents. Her father's framed photograph sat nearby smiling proudly beside the company logo. She turned it face down. What would you do if the thing you sacrificed everything for still fell apart in your hands? A soft knock interrupted the silence. Her assistant stepped inside nervously. There's someone here asking to see you. Olivia rubbed exhausted eyes. Tell them we're closed. He says it's important. I don't care anymore. The assistant hesitated awkwardly. It's Daniel Reed. Olivia froze instantly. 5 minutes later, Daniel entered the office wearing a simple dark coat damp from rain. He looked different somehow. Healthier. More grounded. But the same quiet sadness still lived behind his eyes. Olivia stood slowly. You picked an interesting night to visit. Daniel glanced briefly at the bankruptcy papers. Looks like a hard one. Something about his calmness made her defensive immediately. If you came to enjoy this moment, you earned it. Daniel frowned slightly. Why would I enjoy watching another human being drown? The question hit harder than anger would have. Olivia looked away toward the city lights. Most people would. Most hurt people, Daniel answered softly, just want someone else to stop hurting too. Silence settled heavily between them. Then Daniel reached into his coat pocket and placed a check gently on her desk. Blank. Olivia stared in confusion. What is this? You decide the number. Her breath caught instantly. Daniel. What? I sold my cybersecurity startup last week. Olivia blinked in disbelief. You started a company. Daniel nodded once. After getting fired. Shock spread visibly across her face. But why would you help me after what I did to you? Daniel looked toward the empty office floors below them. Because there are still 300 employees in this building terrified they won't feed their families next month. His voice stayed calm but deeply emotional. And because losing your company shouldn't mean losing your humanity too. Olivia suddenly couldn't breathe properly. Because the man she discarded at his lowest moment was now showing her more grace than she ever showed him. Have you ever been forgiven by someone you didn't deserve forgiveness from? Olivia sat down slowly, tears threatening now. I destroyed people trying to save this company, she whispered. And it still wasn't enough. Daniel pulled out the chair across from her quietly. You know what my son asked after I got fired? She shook her head weakly. He asked if bad days can turn good again. Her eyes filled completely. And what did you tell him? Daniel smiled sadly. I told him people are more important than the worst thing happening to them. The office fell silent except for rain against glass. For the first time in years, Olivia allowed herself to feel the full weight of what leadership without compassion had done to her soul. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted quietly. Daniel looked around the dark office carefully. Start by seeing people before performance. Those words broke something open inside her. At 2 in the morning, Olivia walked downstairs with Daniel through nearly empty office halls. A cleaning woman looked startled seeing the CEO stop beside her cart. "What's your name?" Olivia asked softly. The woman blinked in surprise. "Maria." Olivia smiled weakly. "Thank you for staying this late, Maria." The woman's eyes widened slightly. Such a small moment. Yet somehow it felt larger than every investor meeting Olivia attended all year. Before leaving, Daniel paused near the lobby entrance while rain continued pouring outside. "You know," he said carefully, "Mason still has panic attacks some nights." Guilt crushed her instantly. "Daniel. But last week," he continued softly, he smiled again for the first time in months. Olivia looked at him carefully. "Because of the company you built." Daniel shook his head. "Because he saw me stop believing my worth depended on one person's opinion." Tears finally slid down Olivia's face. Not because of bankruptcy. Because she suddenly understood success meant nothing if achieving it required becoming emotionally blind to other people's pain. Outside, dawn slowly began brightening Boston's skyline while exhausted employees arrived downstairs unaware their jobs might survive after all. And standing there beside the single father she once dismissed as weak, Olivia finally realized something life-changing. The people we underestimate during their hardest seasons are often the very ones capable of saving us when our own world starts falling apart. Dawn spilled pale gold across Boston 3 months later while employees filled the reopened floors of Hartwell Technologies with cautious laughter and the soft rhythm of keyboards returning to life. Coffee machines hummed again. Elevator doors opened non-stop. Plants that once wilted near abandoned desks stood watered and green beneath morning sunlight. But the biggest change was harder to explain. People no longer looked afraid. Have you ever worked somewhere that slowly drained the humanity out of everyone inside it? Olivia Hartwell noticed the difference every day now. Employees actually spoke during meetings. Managers checked on exhausted workers instead of punishing them. Counseling rooms replaced one of the unused executive lounges upstairs. Flexible schedules appeared for parents struggling at home. Profits recovered slowly. Trust recovered slower. But for the first time, the company felt alive instead of merely expensive. Olivia stood near the office windows holding coffee when Daniel arrived carrying his son's forgotten backpack. "Mason left this in my car," he explained. Olivia smiled softly. "He's downstairs teaching the interns how to beat everyone at chess." Daniel laughed quietly. That sound still surprised her sometimes. Because the man she once fired looked lighter now. Not because life became easy, but because pain no longer owned him completely. "What changed your mind?" Olivia asked suddenly. Daniel leaned beside the window. "About what?" "Helping me." Outside, traffic crawled through rainy streets while workers hurried beneath umbrellas. Daniel stayed silent for a long moment. Then he answered honestly. "After my wife died, I spent months angry at the world." His voice lowered carefully. "But eventually I realized wounded people either pass pain forward, or decide it stops with them." The sentence settled deep inside her chest. Because she knew exactly how much pain she inherited from her father's cold obsession with achievement. And how long she continued passing it forward without noticing. What would you do if you realized the person hurting others was slowly becoming you? A commotion suddenly echoed from downstairs. Voices rose sharply near the lobby. Olivia and Daniel exchanged looks before hurrying toward the elevators. When they reached the first floor, reporters crowded outside the glass entrance while employees whispered nervously nearby. Standing in the middle of the lobby was Charles Whitmore. Major investor. Board member. The same man who spent months pressuring Olivia to cut staff and maximize profits no matter the human cost. He looked furious. "You rehired half the employees you laid off." He snapped loudly. "You added mental health programs. Family leave." Employees nearby lowered their eyes anxiously. Olivia stood taller now. "Yes." Charles laughed bitterly. "You're running a business, not a charity." Daniel quietly stepped beside her. And for the first time in years, Olivia didn't feel alone facing powerful people. Charles pointed toward Daniel aggressively. "This is because of him, isn't it? The fired employee who suddenly became your savior." The lobby fell silent. Daniel remained calm. "Nobody needs saving, sir. Just dignity." Charles scoffed. "Dignity doesn't grow companies." "No," Olivia answered suddenly. "But fear destroys them." Everyone stared at her. Because the old Olivia Hartwell would never have challenged investors publicly. But grief changed people. Failure changed people. Compassion changed people even more. Charles stepped closer angrily. Your father would be ashamed of what this company is becoming. The words hit hard. For a moment, pain crossed Olivia's face. Then something unexpected happened. Mason walked into the lobby holding a small chess trophy from the intern competition upstairs. The little boy froze, sensing tension immediately. Daniel crouched gently beside him. Everything okay, buddy? Mason looked uncertain before quietly asking, are people being mean again? The innocence in his voice cut through the entire room. Charles looked uncomfortable instantly. Olivia stared at the child carefully. Because suddenly she remembered being 8 years old hiding outside conference rooms while her father screamed at employees through closed doors. Fear passed down like inheritance sometimes. Unless someone chose differently. Olivia stepped forward calmly. No one's being mean anymore. Then she turned back toward Charles. You once told me compassion makes leaders weak. Her voice stayed steady now. But I've never seen stronger people than the ones surviving impossible lives while still choosing kindness. Employees around the lobby listened silently. Some emotional, some shocked. Charles shook his head in disgust. You'll ruin this company. Olivia smiled faintly. Maybe. She glanced around at the employees, no longer looking terrified to exist inside the building. But at least people won't lose themselves working here anymore. Charles left moments later, furious enough to shake the lobby doors behind him. Silence lingered afterward. Then slowly, unexpectedly, employees began applauding. Not loudly. Just honestly. Daniel looked around at them carefully. People wanted humanity more than perfection. They always had. Later that evening, Olivia visited the small park where Daniel often took Mason after work. Autumn leaves drifted across the playground while the city glowed softly beyond the trees. Mason ran towards swings laughing. Olivia sat beside Daniel quietly on a nearby bench. You know, she admitted softly, I used to think leadership meant never letting people see weakness. Daniel watched his son climbing the jungle gym. And now, her eyes filled slightly. Now I think hiding pain is what makes people dangerous. The wind carried children's laughter through the cooling evening air. For a while, neither spoke. Then Mason ran back holding a bright red leaf proudly. Look, he shouted happily. It's broken a little but still pretty. Daniel smiled warmly. You're right. Olivia stared at the damaged leaf in the child's tiny hands. And suddenly something inside her healed quietly. Because for the first time in her life, she understood a truth no business school or billionaire mentor had ever taught her. People are not valuable because they perform perfectly. They are valuable because even after breaking, they still keep trying to love, hope, and help each other anyway.